Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo and hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I'm your host, Mike Moynihan, as my dad said. Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2023 and another year in the hobby. I guess this is my 42nd year in the hobby, and every year always brings, that feeling of, starting anew and what do I want to get and what am I looking for and all that kind of stuff. I just love the kind of just fresh start that a new year brings. Reminds me of, got new baseball seasons coming up and all kinds of great stuff. So I am so excited about getting going. I've been off for a few weeks, just taking some time and kind of lining up guests for this year. We're going to hit 100 episodes of this show here pretty soon, and I'm really excited about that. But I wanted today to bring a guest on that I've talked to several times. He's become a good hobby friend, and just can you ever have enough good hobby friends? But what Craig brings, I've got Craig Halbig on tonight. He is a dealer, and I love just talking to him about cards and the hobby and the state of it, because he sees it through one lens, and I see it through another as a collector. And he's a collector too, so he actually sees it. He's bifocaled, I guess. He sees it through both lenses for sure. But let me bring Craig on, and he and I will get going here. Craig, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Doing great. Good to see you, Mike.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
What is it about you that when I have you on an episode, they are my most popular episodes by a long shot? What is it? What are you doing over there?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just, I don't know, maybe the topics we're discussing. Maybe it's all the deer hunting stuff that I got in the background last time. They wanted to see all the deer. I don't know, but yeah, it's fun. It's great.
It's your bubbly personality.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right.
So as we get into 2023, Craig, and a lot of people do, what's the state of the hobby? What are you expecting this year? The truth is, none of us really know, right?
Right.
If you would have told me what the hobby would have done in 2020 before it happened, nobody would have believed you. Right? We would have all been like, you're crazy. And so to try to speculate on what we know is silly, I think. But I will ask you, what are you looking forward to? Like, as we embark on 2023, what excites you about the hobby today?
I'd say for 2023, I mean, for me, transition, like I don't have any shows really planned till I think it's March. We're going to be in Nashville. It's going to be business as usual for me. I mean, I'm hoping that everything still stays pretty strong. Now, my last show that I did late fall, it was a little bit slower. That I could tell that sales were a little bit slower, not as much traffic. But a majority of what I have at the shows is raw. A lot of it. I mean, I have some graded, but it's raw. And I've also been, I've got a lot of 70s sets. I think that there's going to be a lot more focus, I think, with collectors on raw. And also those collectors in that era looking at cards, late 60s into the 70s, I think there's going to be more going on there. So, regardless, I mean, I know everybody talks about the economy, recession, all these things are going on, but we still got to remember that we're doing something that we love. And a lot of people that are at these shows, they're getting away and going to a card show to buy cards, build their collection, because they have a passion and they enjoy collecting. So I think that is the upside when we talk about card shows and collecting and what's 2023 going to bring. As maybe things will get a little bit rougher with the economy. It may not. Where interest rates going to go, I don't know. But I do know that a lot of people that are listening to this program, we know a lot of people that love to collect sports cards. And as things might get a little rougher, are people still going to enjoy going to card shows because it makes them feel a little bit better or enjoy? I think it will. So, like you said, we could speculate on what's going to happen in 2023, but I'm looking forward to a good year. I mean, I think it's going to be good because either way, like I talked about, people are still going to continue to collect and buy cards and do what they like to do. So that's kind of my perspective and how I feel about it.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. I mean, for me, it's like, well, Mike, what's different? Nothing. I mean, it's status quo for me.
Right.
Adding cards that I can add when I find good cards at a good price, and
Right.
And
good prices, that's key right there. I mean, you've got to make sure that, like I said, I've said this probably before, you go to shows and there's people that are there to show off their cards, and there's people that are there to sell cards or to help people complete their sets, which for me, that's the whole key, to be able to help the collectors build their sets and really find what they're looking for. So,
I mean, prices have obviously, I'll use the word stabilized, but you primarily deal in vintage, which is why you and I are good friends,
right?
But because we speak the same language on a whole lot of things.
Yeah,
I don't see the vintage market changing a whole lot. Kind of normal, right? It just kind of steady Eddie, right? It just kind of does its thing, and people are always looking for that stuff. Are they going to spend more than they can? Well, nobody should do that, right? But I think that there's always going to be a demand for. The demand is not waning on vintage cards. Agreed?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, someone, instead of spending $100, maybe they're only going to spend $50 or whatever their budget is. Maybe it's going to be a little bit less, but you know what? That's okay. I mean, that's okay. We're still doing sports cards, and we're still doing something that we love. And when I don't do a lot of shows, but the few shows that I do, I mean, the key is helping out the collector, and regardless, you're getting to interact and meet people, and it's fun.
Would you say, and I'm going to throw out not a speculation, but an idea, that I think the vintage collectors are more sticky. Like they're around for the long haul. They're not in it for the quick buck or the. Typically, they're older, not always, but and they're in it for significantly different reasons than the money.
Right.
So that makes them sticky to me. That makes them, they're going to be around a long time. And I think we're still adding those people to the hobby. Like, I don't think that's nobody else is getting into vintage, or no older people are coming into the hobby to be in it long term. I actually think there's a lot of people that have come into the hobby over the pandemic that are going to be in it for the long haul. But I think those, if you were to put them on one side of the room or the other, vintage or modern, the ones that'll be around the long haul are probably the more vintage guys.
Yeah,
would be my guess. That just makes sense to me, right?
Yeah. I talked to so many people last year that maybe had been out of collecting, or they got their cards out and they started collecting again, or maybe they had these certain cards and they decided they were going to build this set. Or talked to a lot of people that were doing that, and I think, like you said, they're going to probably be there for the long haul. They're going to be continue to collect, and you can just feel the passion. When I do these shows, everybody that you're talking to is just they love it. And I love, if I'm not doing a card show, I love to go to card shows and go through boxes and buy cards, and there's just something about it, but like you said, I mean, I think that sticky is a good word. They're going to be around, and I don't see it going away.
Do you think the card show dynamic itself has any changes in the future? I mean, to me, card shows have been pretty much the same for 40 years. They haven't really changed a lot. You see more shows with what has changed, I guess. The simple root of it is a card table with a guy putting cards out and having prices on them, right? That's the simplest form of a card show. But then the stuff around a card show now, trade nights are a relatively new phenomenon to be, very popular type of thing. Autograph guests have always been, since the 80s, you've had autograph guests at card shows. But corporate presence, a lot of companies selling their wares, so to speak, or grading companies on site grading, that's a relatively new phenomenon. Do you see any other things that are kind of shifting in the card show world?
Not really. As you went through that, I was thinking about, I think it would have been 1985 when I did my first card show. And my dad had a showcase made for me out of wood. The local lumber company here made me one, and I've still got it. And I remember doing that show. It was at a hotel, and of course, I didn't have a driver's license, so my mom took me there, and I had a little red cash box, and I had all my cards, and I sat up there, and when I sit there right now, as I think about the surrounding area of the show that we had, like where I'm at, there's not a lot of big shows except, unless you go to Indianapolis or Nashville, but really the setup, and a lot of it is really similar, with cards and albums and boxes and books and stuff like that, a vintage. And like you talked about, I mean, obviously there's a lot more money involved. It costs a lot to put the show together. So you're going to have a lot more, like different things that you talked about. You get the grading companies, but I think the shows are still, a lot of them are really similar because they work. I mean, as long as the collector or the buyer can get through the show and they can it's a little bit organized, and they can get through it. I mean, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. These big shows like the National obviously are just huge, but that's a whole different world. But like here in the Midwest where I'm at, I like to go to a lot of these small shows. There's maybe 75 or 100 tables. And they're really similar to the way they were back in mid 1980s. There's not a whole lot of difference.
It is fascinating to think about how fundamentally similar shows are today.
Yeah.
From decades past. It is pretty simple setup. And again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why?
Right.
What's wrong with the way it is? Do we need, I guess Breakers Pavilion, areas where guys are breaking product live from the show. That's kind of a new thing in the last few years. None of that stuff, like, I don't get jazzed about any of that. I want to go to a table and smell the aroma of old cardboard, right?
Yeah,
and
part of the vintage collector. There you go. I mean, it's in the blood,
Yeah, that epiphany of, wow, it really hasn't changed a lot.
No,
fundamentally in a long, long time.
It hasn't.
And that's actually kind of a cool thing about it, right? I think that makes it kind of like a baseball game, right? You go to baseball, and baseball has been played pretty much the same way for a really long time, and that lends itself to being a generational type of a thing. A father can take a son, and it's the same game that they watched when they were kids with their dad, and so on. And you can go to a show now, and it's fundamentally the same as, if I take my kids, that's fundamentally the same as when I went as a kid. And it can be, you see I've seen a lot of father sons, a lot of parents bringing their kids into the hobby and to shows, and the kids are all excited. And it's funny, they have a different perspective probably than the parents do, but the kids have always had a different perspective than their parents do. And they're all about value and, maybe a player because they love the player or whatever, but they don't, maybe we aren't that dissimilar, but certainly the money just aspect of it.
Right.
And they like to trade again, like trading's coming back. Right. And just see that a lot more. And it kind of died for a while there. It was kind of in a dead zone. Not that trading ever went away completely, but it feels like it's a resurgence. Raw, I think, like you mentioned, is going to be a huge resurgence. I think that'll be a big differentiator in 2023.
Yeah.
Driven primarily by cost of grading.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like, I'll take it raw. But what that's done is it's allowed people to rediscover the joy of a raw card.
Right.
Because they couldn't grade it because it was too expensive. They're like, hey, I can enjoy this the way it is in its natural form. Right.
And they can still get it graded if they decide to later. They've got options. If they want to have it raw and have it in their hands, that's fine. And if they decide later on, well, I think I want to get that graded, and they can do that too. So actually they got a few more options there, unless they want, there's those that buy them and then they crack them out. I know some people do that too, but I think raw is going to be big this year.
I do too. And it's hit me too, in the sense, I'm a big graded guy, no doubt. Everybody knows that. But I have embarked on this I like projects that I can't finish quickly, and it will take me some time because it's the joy of going through that process of picking out the cards and whatever. And I've kind of said, okay, I want to get a raw set of every set that Topps has ever put out, 51 through now 2023. And having some opportunities to look at some collections and pick up some starter sets of 58, 57, start knocking out some chunks. That's always a good way to start to me.
Yes.
And you would probably agree, getting a starter set, and there may be some in there that you want to upgrade or whatever. You can always do that down the road. But I want to put them all in binders, which sucks because it takes up a lot of space. And my room here, for those of you guys watching on YouTube, is not very big. It's a pretty small bedroom. You're down in your basement, I think, right?
Yeah.
And you got a pretty nice space there. I'm quite jealous of it, actually. But I don't have a ton of room, and it does take up a lot of space. So I'm like, it's forcing me to go slower and that's a good thing, like to pace myself with it, to make sure I have the room, the binders, the right pages, all the things that'll make that set, for me to love it. Right. And be able to enjoy it and all those things. I used to think, man, I don't want to buy all these commons of guys I've never heard of. And I'm a big Hall of Fame guy, and I still am. I still don't want to pay a lot for those commons, but I do want to have them in my collection. I want examples of every card that Topps has ever made. I think it'd just be awesome. And not looking forward to 52 Topps, honestly.
Yeah.
And quite a few of the years that have tough high numbers, 67, 71, 72. But it's a fun, I made a spreadsheet and I'm really like, okay, I'm going for this, and it might be where I'm going, okay, I'll try to do, I kind of thought, if this makes any sense, 1 or 2 sets a year to try to complete. And by buying, starter lots, several hundred count starter lots. And luckily I already have most of the Hall of Famers from that era, right? That's kind of the good thing. And I know I bought a 65 set from a guy, and I said, take all the Hall of Famers out. I don't need them. I got every one of them. And that lowered the price of that set tremendously. Yeah. And I was able to buy the rest of the cards for a reasonable amount, so that does put me in a little bit of an advantage. But the whole idea of having all the cards raw is definitely something I've even bought into.
Yeah.
So I totally get why people like it. There's
a lot of them that build sets and that have every year or certain years. They start with their birth year and have the spreadsheets. And it's once you get it started and you start building sets, it's addictive for sure.
So how many, you personally, your collection, because you have tons of sets, right?
I've got quite a few
that are kind of, you would consider your personal collection.
Yeah.
That aren't for sale necessarily, or is everything for sale for the right
price? No.
What makes it into the Craig personal collection?
Oh, if they're really nice, like I really like, I like too much actually, but no, like one of my favorite sets, of course, is the 53 Bowman color, just because I like the photos, and I've got a really nice set there. And I've got 64 Topps I really like. That's one of my favorite sets. I've got some really nice 60 sets. And then kind of like you, I started the Hall of Fame rookie collection, so I started doing that. And then I've got, 64 stand-ups are kind of unique, and I built a really nice set of those with, those are kind of hard to find in 7s and 8s and in that near mint shape. So I've got that set.
That's a car, I also like the idea of having examples of different sets to me, and Dr. Beckett really hammered this home for me. He and I were talking, we've done it both on air and privately in conversations we have. He's like, Mike, just worry about building a great collection for you. What is that? Build a great collection. You don't have to have, one great card. Build a great collection.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for you? And each one of us are going to have a different definition of what that means. But mine is, I would like to have a 64 stand-up in my collection. I don't have any. And so I've been picking off as I see cards that especially in all these collections that we're seeing. I'm able to buy things that I, quite frankly, don't look for at shows. Because I'm looking for other stuff, and
Right.
you can't look for everything. Like you said, you can't buy everything, and you can't be looking for everything all the time. But when it's put right in front of you, right? When I'm looking at a collection, it's like, oh man, I don't have this or that or whatever. And it's like, I'm trying to think of some examples. I can't off the top of my head, but it's been cool to add type, kind of like a type collection, right?
Right.
One of everything for all the different, like I really want some 71 Top Supers. I don't have any of those. I think they're super cool. And I watched a video. It's funny how I get inspired watching other people. And one of my buddies did a video on it, on the 71 Top Supers, and showing some of the cars. Like, God, these are gorgeous. Why haven't I ever looked at these, and they're a bigger sized. And so it starts me on these little rabbit trails of collecting, which is
those are so unique. I mean, I've got those sets, all that stuff. The posters, like the 70, I've got every poster set. I've got the wax boxes of the sets. The 72 posters I've got them in the big top loaders,
Yeah.
Those are not, you don't see those every day. And I've got a set, and they're all just, they're immaculate. And it's just something I just love them. I'll never sell them. The photos are really cool. Just all that unique, anything that's unique, and it's, same thing when you go to the National. What's everybody's looking for? Those unique, different. If you've got anything that's unique, people are gonna buy it. I mean, because those things that you don't find every day, I think that's kind of what you're talking about too. There's a lot of things that you don't ever see that you're like, oh wow, that's cool. I need to get that and put that in my collection.
Yeah, because you go to a show and you see everybody's got Manels and Mays. Everybody's got and you look around, you're like, this stuff's pretty common. Like, this is not hard to find. There are plenty of these out there for the world, to have. And so 64 stand-ups, are great.
They'll go, like, if I take 64 stand-ups to a show, I'll probably sell all of them. They'll get gobbled up.
And then there's sets that are, I think, just underappreciated, and they're still super cheap, like 64 Topps Giants. I know you had a ton of them. Like the first time I met you, actually, you had a bunch of them, and they were graded. And I brought a buddy to your booth. I'm like, you need to buy something. Like, he bought a Mantle and a Clemente from you.
I have hundreds and hundreds of those raw. Yeah. I mean, and I always bring them to the show. They're so reasonable. I mean,
yeah,
they're great cards.
Like, you want an Aaron or a short? Yeah, Mays has a stand up. His is a short print, though, I think, if I remember right.
I think so.
But Mantle, K-Line, and Killebrew, like, there's so many great players in that set, right? So many Hall of Famers, and super reasonable.
Yeah.
Not even that expensive, especially raw. You can get them pretty cheap. It's funny, we're in January right now. Happy New Year, by the way. I didn't say that at the very beginning.
New Year, yeah.
It is, to me, there's always been seasons in the hobby. And what I mean by that is, or within the hobby, it feels like that no matter what's going on, like, I know football playoffs are about to start and college football is wrapping up. Go Frogs. My TCU Horned Frogs are in the national championship. We're recording this before the national championship, so I don't know what happened. By the time you guys see this, we'll know what happened. So you'll know if I'm in a good mood or a bad mood next Wednesday when you watch this. But the seasons of the hobby, the seasons of the way it goes, winter just feels slower, even though there are pro sports going on. Why do you think that is? First of all, do you think that's a true statement or somewhat true statement, and why do you think that is?
I think it is a little bit slower in the fall and winter months. But, I've done shows, like February, when things start firing up and people get ready for spring break. I don't know if it's because it's after the holidays and everybody's ready to go, but a lot of times those first few shows, the first part of the year, are usually really strong. It seems like there's a lot more collectors and a lot more people out buying cards. So, but I do agree with you on, towards the end of the year, I think it slows down a little bit. I actually sold a few things on eBay here recently, and I was surprised everything went real fast. But traffic. Like I think I did a show in Dallas that January and February, I think, or what does he usually have, a January show and a February show?
Yeah, there's one coming up here soon.
Yeah. And those are usually really, really good shows. Those are usually busy. And then I've got a March show I know I'm going to do in Nashville. I know that one that'll be a busy one. But I think it's just people, you've got that kind of lull where there's no baseball. And I know there's football collectors too, but majority of the stuff that if I'm at a show, usually everybody's looking for baseball. There's some football, but everybody's ready for spring training to start, and they start getting excited about baseball and collecting and getting back to it. So I think 2023. I think it's going to be a good year. I really do on collecting. I think it's going to be good. We'll see, but that's my prediction.
Well, the hobby ain't dying, right?
No.
All this talk about the hobby's dead and da da da. I think that's just such a bunch of hooey.
Yeah, I do too.
There's no way that the hobby's going to die. It goes through periods of high interest and lower interest and yada yada, and peaks and valleys, right? But
right.
To me, that feels more like a price thing than an interest thing, right? I'm always interested in cards, right? I'm never not, but I do feel like you do have this lull starting in November, and it's probably holiday related, right? You can see it makes total sense that people are busy with other stuff. The hobby for almost all of us isn't the only thing we're doing. We're all, have families and kids and jobs and vacations and all kinds of stuff. And I think the only reason the middle of the summer isn't a dead time in the hobby is because the national happens. And so there's always buzz around that leading up to it. I do think there's a post-national kind of letdown. Like August feels slower to me hobby-wise. Then it kind of picks up in the fall as football gets going and people just get excited about that and are looking at cards. And then you have this other period so it just feels like there's this, maybe these, again, I call them seasons, right? Within the hobby throughout any given year. And I think we're about to, like you said, come out of that February, March. It starts feeling like, ooh,
yeah.
And you have things to look forward to. And, the whole spring is sprung and hope eternal and all these things that it translates over to the hobby.
Yeah, it does. I think so. And you got the folks that are collecting the newer stuff, they're looking at, the new rookies and they're at the shows and that's going on too, which is great. So it creates a lot of excitement with the collectors. Yeah,
for sure. And again, with that idea that the fundamental idea of a show doesn't change, do you ever see what makes someone, I don't know how to ask this the way I'm thinking about it, but I'll do my best. When you're at a show and you're set up, is it weird sometimes or do you see, God, I'm having a really hard time articulating what I want to say. Are there things that are hot? Are there certain years, certain decades that it feels like, man, everybody's asking me about this show? I don't know.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
What drives that, or what have you, tell me some stories or something.
I don't know. I mean, last year it seemed like I could not have enough 1956 tops. And, there's just certain cards, people love the 1956 tops because you have the action and then you have the photo of the player. And, it all goes back to a lot of times just those certain photos and those certain cards. In 1970s, I mean, from 70 tops to into all the years of the 70s towards the end of last year was just everybody was building those sets. People love to go through boxes and buy Hall of Famers from the 1970s because they're reasonable. You can get them. And, it seemed like that was just a hot item. But 1956, for some reason, is a year. 53 Bowman Color is another year. And then when you get into the 60s, 63, 64, 65 is always a seller. 66 and 67 high numbers. Everybody wants those because they're tough to find. You're talking about you're building your sets. Those 66 and 67 high numbers they're tough. They're just tough to find in general when you go to a show. So yeah, there's always certain years that, I'd like to have more of to help the collector to build their sets. You don't always hit it right at every show, but I try to. I try to have enough to where, for some reason, 56 tops. So I always tried to bring several books and maybe a whole box full of 56s where people could go through and build their sets. So those years, but yeah, it's funny how that works. I mean, some years are just more popular than others, and maybe it's just that specific show. Back-to-back shows you'll have it, but it does happen.
What about player emphasis, like people asking about certain players?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Mantl's always the guy. Those usually go. Clemente, Aaron, Mays, those are always their hot items. But a lot of times, I try to have my raw cards. I try to have not in nice shape. So I mean, a lot of times, if they can just, most of the collectors, if they see a Hall of Famer and the card is sharp and it's raw and it's nice, they're satisfied with the card. It doesn't have to be a Mantle, an Aaron, or a Mays. Maybe it's a Killebrew or an Aparicio or a Fox or whoever. Maybe they like a certain team, but if it's a nice raw, I mean, if it looks nice, a lot of times they sell. I mean, they sell. There's enough collectors that just, and like you talked about earlier, what Dr. Beckett said about finding the right, build the collection for you. Everybody's a little bit different, but a lot of folks are just looking for a nice looking card. It may not be a Mantle, it may be a Nelly Fox or an Aparicio or whoever, but that's nice raw card sell, and they have for me. So
but do you also have guys that come up? Like I'm much less condition sensitive probably because I have so many other things I want to get and I want to stretch my dollar, my hobby dollar more. So I might go, hey dude, show me your beaters.
Yep. I had a lot of that. I put that stuff out just kind of an off grade and I'll sell them. And yeah, when that collector comes by, when they go through all that stuff, I sell a lot of that too. So usually if and not everybody has that off grade grouping of all Hall of Famers, but I have hundreds of those and I put them out. And when you get that one guy that goes through there, he'll usually buy quite a few because I've got them discounted quite a bit. So just something for everybody, I guess.
One thing I've always thought about what makes you different and why I think I just immediately connected with you is you're willing to work with collectors. And I think you can see through, you talk to enough people,
mm-hmm.
Who really is passionate about it and you can tell. And not that somebody can't fool us every once in a while, but by and large, I think you're probably a pretty good judge of the collector and okay, let me, put a lot together and you're willing to work with people. And it feels like dealers are stuck in, early 2021 pricing. And what makes a dealer willing to just go, okay, these just aren't selling for what I could get a year ago? Have you had to adjust kind of how your pricing works, or how do you do that?
Not really. I mean, I really haven't. I mean, on the raw stuff, a lot of it has been pretty consistent for me all of last year. I try to be as fair as I can with my prices, and a lot of times, a lot of them will come straight to my table and they'll spend a majority of their time there. But
you probably already have it priced pretty reasonably to begin with, right?
I do. And then if somebody spends quite a bit, I think everybody just wants to make sure that they get a fair price and that they're happy with the deal. I mean, and that, for me, it's the same way because I want them to come back if I come back to that show, So I think that's important. But, again, for me, and I know I've talked about this before, is being a collector, I kind of try to build what I'm going to take to a show is something that I would kind of be interested in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
To try to have, if I when I go to a show to buy cards for my collection, I want to go through books. I want to go through maybe some boxes of some raw and, just different things. So I try to have a mix of everything. So everybody has an opportunity to maybe find what they like to go through or how they like to look at the cards and different conditions. Most of my stuff's pretty nice. Like I said, I do have that off grade stuff. But as far as the pricing, everything's still, pretty much the same. I know some people look on eBay or that when you're taking, I couldn't even tell you how many cards I take to a show. I mean, I don't have time to look on eBay on a raw card, I just
And even then, how can you really?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think most people, I give them a fair enough price, and we do some business, and a lot of times they'll come back or they'll spend hours there. A lot of times they'll spend hours, and the table will be jammed with people going through books and filling their sets. So, but treating people right, I think Holly and I and my buddy Ryan, when we do the shows, we try to be as fair as we can and make sure everybody is happy. I mean, it's fun. Card collecting should be fun. So
I bet the best compliment you can get, if this ever happened to you, it wouldn't shock me a bit, but a guy coming up to a table and he's got his buddy with him. He's like, "Oh man, we got to stop at this table. This guy has great stuff and he's very fair." I mean,
yeah,
if everybody says that, then you've done your job, right?
yeah, you're exactly right. And if they don't, or something's not right, then I'm not doing my job. So I think it's, and like you said, I know that I've been to card shows. I know there's dealers that, they don't deal on anything or their prices. And it's just, do they even say hi, or they kind of, I mean, I think even if someone doesn't buy any cards, I mean, we can talk about cards, and that's fine. I mean, it's all about enjoying the hobby. And if I can sell a few cards, that's fine to help kind of support my collecting and everything, that's good. But I love it. Like I said, I've been kind of doing shows for a long time.
Right.
But it's
What's
just
the
once
most
it gets in your
boring?
blood.
What's the most boring thing about a card show, about setting up and being a dealer?
Boring? Gosh, I don't know that there's anything really boring for me about it. I mean, if there's a slow time, and there's not that many people at my tables, I'm walking around looking to buy stuff for my collection. Always, if it's Heartland statues, I got them right over here, or whatever it is. The 33 Gaudis, I love those. Whatever. I'm buying cards for my collection. I mean, as far as boring, I mean, it is a lot of work. I'm lucky I've got Holly and to help, and Ryan when he can help. But I'm always having fun. Or you're visiting with. There's always somebody to visit with. Maybe it's somebody else that's set up next to you, or you're visiting with them and you meet people. Or so I don't know. Boring is never a word that I've ever used, I don't think, at a card show for me. I mean, maybe it is for some dealers, I don't know, but I mean, I'm at a card show, so I'm I mean, I'm living life, I
Good,
mean,
right?
I'm selling a few cards, and I'm probably buying a few cards, so I'm having fun. So I'm not boring. To me is ball humbug, or what am I doing here? We're collecting cards, so we're
There are
enjoying it.
dealers that you see that have that look on their face of, man, I'd rather be anywhere else than here. And that's
Well, then stay home, because
right.
a card show that's just my opinion, but
Yeah.
a card show, we're there to have a good time. So that's what it should be.
And I can attest that what he's saying is true, because I've been to Craig's table many times when he's not there. I'm like, Holly, where's Craig? I've either brought somebody to his table to look at some stuff, and they were looking, oh, I know Craig has that or whatever. Oh, he's out buying cards, and it's hilarious and she'll call
fun.
you or text you like, hey, come back. And I know she probably has to do that a lot for you.
Yeah.
Hey, this person's looking at this or wants to get a price on whatever.
Meeting people. There's so many people that you can meet, and everybody has a story. Everybody has a story about their collection or about ball players that they've met. And I collect autographs, or, I met this ball player, and, then you start talking about what you collect. And I mean, to me, that's what it's all about,
And they're always cool stories.
They are.
I don't ever hear a card story and go, man, that's terrible. Why'd you tell me that? Like, yeah. I've never felt that way. It's always interesting. And there's always some thread of connection there, right? It may not be a perfect alignment in what I collect, but there's always something I can go, man, I really respect that you love that, or very cool that you had that. And then you can understand why they connect with that player or that set, or, connecting those dots is fun.
Or even talking about, the collections, and you talk about different people and all the collections. I've been lucky to buy some amazing collections over the years of just unbelievable stuff. I mean, and you talk to other people, and everybody likes to see those, and even those posts maybe on Facebook, or those stories about, so-and-so walked in and they had a cigar box full of 1933 Gaudis, or, and I've had the opportunity to do that myself. But there's those stories. To hear those stories are always like, wow, that's exciting, and maybe that's always an opportunity for somebody, or maybe we've got a chance to find a collection like that someday.
So I was playing golf today. This happened literally today. The guy I was playing with, he works at the course, and he said, yeah, one of the volunteers up here, his name's Al. Al will never watch this, so he won't know what I'm talking about. But Al's in his, he's in his mid 70s. And I don't know, I can't figure out how it ever came up, but he started talking about his baseball cards. And my buddy who works at the golf course knows that I'm heavy into cards and have do all this stuff and chasing cardboard and all that. He's like, you need to talk to Mike. Mike, he's here. Like, I live there at the golf course pretty much. And so I talked to him today. He was out riding the machine that goes and picks up all the golf balls on the range. And I flag him down. I'm like, Al, come here. I heard you have some cards. He goes, yeah, it's all stuff from when I was a kid. And I don't even know what all I have. And I said, dude, I would love to look at it. Like, if he's in his mid 70s, right? When he was a kid, it was late 50s, early 60s.
When was this? Yesterday?
Today. This happened today.
Well, you won't sleep tonight then. You'll be up thinking about it.
I wonder what he has, and will anything come? I don't know, but it's fun to have that excitement and like, oh my gosh, I might find some stuff that hasn't seen the light of day in 50 years, that would be cool. And I've told this to people before, because I'll be looking through collections, and you probably have this same feeling when you're talking with a guy who's selling it, and I show him a card. I'm like, God, this is so cool. And their immediate reaction typically is, ooh, does that mean it's valuable? And I'm like, no, cool doesn't equal value, not all the time, right? Cool can just be cool if it's a great card of a great player, but maybe not in the best of shape. Right. It doesn't mean it's not cool. Yeah. Right. It's still cool, or something that's unique, but maybe just isn't valuable for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons why rare doesn't mean equal value, but I try to get them to understand the distinction between cool and valuable.
Right.
They can be two different things, but
yeah,
each one pretty awesome. Yeah. We all want valuable stuff if we're selling it, but if I've bought stuff that was a couple bucks that I just thought was neat.
Right.
It wasn't expensive. It was just something I wanted to add, like that. I got it right here. You may have seen this top certificate. Did you see when I bought this in West Virginia? It's like this is pre-Tops. This is World War II. So Tops wasn't making cards yet.
That's cool.
But they were selling chewing gum. And so they weren't allowed to sell gum anymore, but they could do these like raffles and stuff. And so I just thought that was so unique and different. I'd never seen one.
Right. And that is cool.
I had to buy it. I didn't, and I didn't pay a lot of money for it.
You saw it. You knew you had to have it.
Yeah. And that was in a collection in West Virginia, the one we did for Chasing Cardboard in West Virginia. So I just always am looking for cool. I think you're right. Unique and different. And I'm even more in tune with that now as I continue to mature as a collector.
Right.
Right. And that you see it's funny, the baby boomers, and I want to go back to the 70s that you mentioned, because I think that's an interesting point that you were making. The baby boomers, they grew up in the 50s and 60s, right? I was born in 73. I think you're not much older than me though.
72.
Yeah, at all.
Right.
So now we're getting to that age, we're pushing 50, guys in their 50s that grew up in the 70s maybe, or early 70s. Those are going to start becoming those cards that they want to have from their childhood, right?
Right.
The age group, the demographic that's getting older, the baby boomers, they either have all what they have or whatever, and you're going to have this new wave of this next generation of guys that are going to go, man, I want this set and this set, because that's what I remember as a kid, or that's when I was born. So I think you're right. I think 70s cards have some room in them, and there's plenty of them, right? That's the other cool thing, is that they're not rare. They weren't as thrown away as much maybe as like the 50s and 60s stuff by the parents. And so you can certainly find them, and that'll make it even more popular because they're readily available. They're relatively inexpensive. And so I think you'll see that surge in desire for 70s cards. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I agree. I've got a couple 70s star boxes. Now I've got the, different years set up, but the 70s star boxes, people just love to go through there and, oh, this is cool. Like you're saying, the cool, but you can pull out all the Hall of Famers and it's just that era, those folks right now, they're excited about those cards in the 70s. And I always try to bring as much as I can because they're going to be looking for them. A lot of people are building sets in the early to mid 70s and even late 70s too. I bring that stuff. So it's exciting. We're getting to that point. We're getting to that era where, like I said, we're 50. And that's kind of the stuff when I kind of started collecting in 77, 78, 79, so it's cards that I love, but I take a lot of that stuff to the shows because it's hot item. Hot item last year was in 75 tops, very popular. A lot of people collect those. You got there's so many good Hall of Fame rookie cards that year in 75. A lot of people building those sets.
What's your favorite 70s set?
Probably the 72, just because that was the year I was born. I really like the 72. 71 tops with the black. I mean, of course, I've got all these sets, but I've got a raw set. So if I've got some 71s and I find one, man, that one's really nice, I'll pull my set out and I'll be like, okay, that one's an upgrade, because there's always that one little chip. Well, that one's got a little chip spot on it, so I'm gonna upgrade that one. So I'm always upgrading my 71. I've got all those sets. I'd say 72 is probably my favorite. I don't know. I just like the 72 high numbers are kind of tough, but that's probably my favorite 70 set. I'd say 72 tops.
I think tops kind of mailed it in the 70s for the most part. It's probably one of my least favorite decades. Just designs feel lazy. A lot of the pictures are terrible, especially like 73, 74. And I have a near and dear 73 for me, same reason as you. That's the year I was born. And so I love all of them. So I don't want it to sound like I'm just poo-poo on the 70s, but right. I don't know. I've always liked 79. I always liked the little flag banner, at the bottom for the team. The design is incredibly simplistic, but I love it. It just, again, because when I started collecting in 81, a 79 card was an old card to me. Like, dude, this is old. This is, and it wasn't. It was just, it's so silly to actually think that I thought that, but I did. I was like, oh man. Yeah, this was before I started collecting. This is awesome, in 78, 77. Forget about 75s, because that was like super old. Yeah. It's all relative, I guess, to your age, right? Like, yeah, that's 3/4 of my life ago, and it was, but so I've always loved 79. People probably think I'm crazy for loving 79, but no, I do. And 78s are cool. I love the shield for the All-Stars, on 78. Yep.
The Mike Schmidt card in 78 was always a card that and the 78 Eddie Murray. Like, I remember as a kid, I just thought, that was just such of a cool card. I've actually got hit that rack pack with Eddie Murray showing. But, it's just one of those things that you just remember as a kid,
One of my big cards one card that's kind of high on my list this year is a 78 Eddie Murray autographed.
Yeah.
I don't have one of those, and I've got most of the rookie cards now. I've gotten a lot of them that are signed, and that's one that's kind of eluded me. And it's not crazy expensive, but it's always been expensive enough where I'm like, yeah, do I want to? And now I'm getting to the point. I've got the Ozzie Smith signed. I'm kind of working backwards. I got a Ricky Henderson signed, right? So 78 is pretty much
3,000 hits, 500 home runs for Steady Eddie, right? Yeah,
great switch hitter. And so because now I don't just want the card, I want it signed.
Yeah,
because
I love the signed autograph rookie. I got all that stuff. I love that stuff too.
Yeah.
Oh man,
great stuff. And I think that's becoming incredibly popular.
Yeah.
I mean,
I started sending stuff off and mailing off cards to all the Hall of Famers and getting those autographed. And most all of them are so great. I mean, they're gracious. Sometimes they'll sign extra stuff. Or Burt Blyleven was just great. Leave an extra note, and Bobby Richardson, a
yeah,
couple extra autographs in there and things, So a lot of them are just, it really helps fuel the passion for vintage and getting the opportunity to send some cards off to Mazeroski, send some cards off to these guys, and they sign them and send them back. So yeah, it's fun.
it's amazing. Guys like Bobby Richardson, like you mentioned, Bill Math, they're still signing.
Yeah,
Brooks Robinson started signing again. I mean, these guys have been around forever.
yeah,
And the fact that they still do that for people that are willing to send cards
it's awesome.
Very, very cool. Yeah. Well, man, I've taken up so much of your time, but always, you're a gracious guest and you're awesome.
A lot of fun.
Make sure you tell Holly hi for all of us out here.
I will, yeah. Yep.
I think that's why our first show of this was.
I think
this
so.
is your, I think, third time on the show.
It is, yeah.
And yeah, we talk more than just 3 times, but
it's fun. I love talking vintage and sports cards and collections and just in general. You can't beat it.
I love it when you tell me stories about people coming up to your table and saying, "Hey, I saw you on that show."
Yeah, a lot. I get a lot of that.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
I love you guys making that connection with Craig. And when you see him at a show, make sure you say hi. He'll treat you right. Anything you want to tell her? You want to plug anything for yourself or where they can find you or anything?
I'll be doing a show, Jeff's big show in Nashville. I think that's in March. And then there's a big show in Indianapolis, that Midwest Monster. I'll probably be doing that one. Of course, the National. I think I've got 2 booths this year at the National. So I'll be there and I'll be bringing a lot of stuff to the National. That's always exciting. So
I'll be at Craig's table at the National a lot because it's usually positioned where it's a nice place for me to sit down for a minute and take a break. So I was like, "Hey, Craig, can I come sit down?" And of course, you're always so great and so nice to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right, guys. Well, till next week, we'll be back on the horse here now. Appreciate everybody tuning in, watching, listening. Have a great day. Have a great week and keep collecting.